So we're now going to have a conversation, and I hope people will be ready to share some of their questions as well. But I'm going to quiz a panel, and the topic is leveling up. How can blockchain help upgrade the gaming experience? So those folk who had questions about what actually blockchain brings to it, we're going to answer some of that now. So I'd like to welcome to the stage, please, my panelists. We've got Michael Sanders, who spoke earlier on. He's welcome to come back. We've got Frank Chen from Aleo. And I think we've got Mohammad Agha from Magmic as well. Hey, brilliant. So round of applause for my panel. Come on up. So we're going to cover some of these topics. Now, we've got 40 minutes here. We're going to quiz our panel of experts. If you've got questions, put your hand up and I'll try and grab them as we go, but I'll definitely leave time at the end for them. How can blockchain help upgrade the gaming experience? So look, we've had some great questions this morning as our speakers have talked about the services that they have. And I've been a gamer and covering the game scene as a journalist for many years. And some traditional gamers, let's call them Web 2 gamers, ask the question, like, what do I actually need blockchain for? Like, what does it bring to my experience? Developers, I'm sure, have similar questions. But I think this year, after many years of blockchain and Web3 being around, we're seeing some fantastic games come out that use the blockchain. So let's dive into it. We're going to discuss the benefits and use cases of Web3 tech for games, talk about some of the services available to developers, and help us all understand a little bit better what we can do and how it enhances the gaming experience. So look, let me get started. I introduced the experts at the start, but I'll invite them now to say a few words. So let's start with Frank. Do you want to just introduce yourself and your business?
Yeah, sure. I'm Frank Chen. I'm from Aleo. We are a platform to help build zero-knowledge, decentralized private applications. We're ZKL1, and I am the head or product lead for consumer products. So not only do I look at what applications are most suited for zero-knowledge, and that includes gaming, that includes identity, other use cases as well. Yeah.
Great, thank you. Mohammad, how you doing?
Hi, I'm Mo. I'm from Magmic. We're a mobile game developer and publisher doing some web stuff as well. We're currently building a Web3 game. I've been working in the space for a few years now. We're working on we're in the intersection of gaming, Web3, and sports at the moment.
Fantastic, thank you. And Michael, yes, please.
Hey everyone, I'm Michael Sanders. I'm co-founder at Horizon. Our mission is about making Web3 easy, fun, and accessible for everyone. So we've built Sequence, which is an all-in-one developer platform that makes building Web3 games, applications, and experiences easy. And we also created Skyweaver, which is a free-to-play trading card game and was recently named 2022's best blockchain game.
Fantastic, thank you. Well, look, a range of experiences there, coming at it from different angles, and let's just dive right in. I'm going to ask a question that is a kind of a version of something that someone said already. I'll tell you what, since Michael, you just spoke, let's start with you and ask go down the line after that. Right, what can you do with blockchain that you couldn't do before? We had games before, right? What can you do now?
Yeah, so for anyone that saw my talk, I'm going to repeat myself. I think a lot of the benefits revolve around items, user-generated content, and game design possibilities, unlocking new possibilities. If we dive into items and we think about why do players buy game items in Web 2 games, I think it's for either utility, status, or the pleasure of collecting. Now, if you add Web 3 into the mix, players will still buy items for those 3 reasons, in addition to at least 5 more. So there can be value, resaleability, and again, not just for profit. Like, I don't think that's the goal here, but it's just the ability to resell it, recoup some of your cost if you get bored with a game or an item. There's also this notion of cross-game or cross-brand interoperability. I'm going to use the exact same example I gave earlier. If you look at a game like NBA 2K, let's say they enable Web3 shoes, digital shoes, and players can buy Adidas shoes. Well, then the brand Adidas could look at the blockchain and see like, oh, all these players own Adidas digital kicks, and then Adidas could give those players a gift, whether it's a glowing version of those Adidas shoes in-game or maybe a voucher for physical merchandise. And so lots to explore in that space to add more value to players' experiences. Then you also have this notion of persistence. So if you own a Web3 game item, it exists forever. Other folks can extend its utility and its value by building, like a new game around it that you could bring those items to, or a lending service, or all kinds of new applications. And then you also have this notion of like a collection history and a universal profile so that you could bring the items you own into various virtual worlds and games. Perhaps not necessarily to play with them in those worlds, but maybe you could display them, and a whole bunch of different like nuances could exist. So that's kind of around items, which Web3 really unlocks. And then user-generated content, so UGC. I think there's tons of opportunity here whereby you could allow your community to create items for your game. And let's just say they're cosmetic items because that'll probably be easier to integrate. And if you create those, if the community creates those items, they could then sell in your game's in-game marketplace. And the royalties and the transaction fees from those sales and trades could be split between the creator of the item and the game. So it creates this really like symbiotic win-win scenario where the game is having more content produced without, having to pay for it. And the community gets to contribute to the game and monetize their contributions. So lots to explore in the UGC space. And then third is around game design possibilities. So I think there's like actually an infinite realm that we're just scratching the surface of. And I gave a few examples earlier, like maybe factions could form around the Web3 game items that players own in a game. So let's say there's like 10 factions and you get organized into your teams based on the game items you own. Or you could unlock new downloadable content by owning or winning or buying a particular Web3 game item. Or there you could create trading mechanics and rewards based on trading activities. So let's say, I want to use a different example, but this one, I just said it earlier. If you're like a spy in a game and you need to go to a fancy dinner and you need a really dope suit, and so you wear your nice suit, but then let's say you need to go into like a favela in Brazil later on and you don't want to be wearing a super fancy suit. So there's a trading mechanic in it and you have to trade the item a few times and then your suit evolves into something that's like tattered and beat up so that you're not standing out and you can blend into the environment. And again, I think that's just a few examples of what Web3 can enable, and I would love to hear from Frank and Mo because I'm sure they have like different ideas too.
No, it's great. You've reminded me of an example I'm going to give as well. But Mo, let's chip in yourself here.
Well,
what can you do with blockchain that you couldn't do before?
Not much, to be honest. But I think really, which is really the argument. You hear it all the time, right? People are like, well, what's the point of blockchain? But for us and for me, as a gamer who plays free-to-play games like League of Legends, it's really all about in-game ownership at the end of the day, right? I actually own my items versus just the license to use them. I think that's going to be like the big differentiator between blockchain and non-blockchain games, right? Is that I actually own my items. I can see the scarcity of them. So if you're releasing limited edition items, I know that there's only 10 of them. You can tell who has them as well. So it provides transparency in these in-game items and gives you the full ownership of it, right? So, as he said over here, like when you get bored of the game, maybe you can offload some of your assets. Right. You can regain some of the money you spent. Those thousands of dollars you spent in League of Legends or whatever. So that's really at the root of it. You can do some cool stuff with blockchain, but I mean, it is kind of valid when people are like, well, we can do everything in blockchain with block 2. Yes, kind of can, but you just can't. You can't do the easy asset transfer like where it's independent, where it's public, where people can actually see it, right, and transparent. And so you can actually create true scarcity in your items, and therefore, through that, maybe create value, right? Yeah. So I think that's one of the main things, right? And there's some cool things you can also do with NFTs, through Providence, for example, right? Be able to track the history of this NFT that you had. Maybe somebody famous owned it before, so now it's more right. It's got more value. So there's things like that you can do, and I think that you can prove and confirm like on the blockchain. It really and also lends itself well, I think, blockchain to collection type of games, right? So games that you naturally collect things in. So those are the games that I think they will do really well with blockchain. But I don't think it's something that you could slap onto anything. It's right. It's certainly something where, and obviously it kind of really only works with free to play games or games that have in-game items, I think. Right, yeah. So for me, it's all about owning the content that you pay for digitally in the game.
That's perfect. That's great. It's been said before, I think, here that the cost to the gamer of changing to a different game or getting bored of a game is exactly 100%. unless there's a way to do something with what you've created in that game.
Exactly.
Frank, what's your take on this?
Yeah, I think like I don't have much to add, like based off of what Mo and also Michael, sorry, Michael have added already. I think really ownership of game assets is one like basically have interoperability between games.
We'll come to that. Yeah, let's do that.
So it's like there's definitely like value to the gamer. They kind of like have an exit door, multiple exit doors possibly. I will say like when it comes to gaming, like from a product perspective though, like we can talk about blockchain all we want, but I also feel like you need to think about like what is fun to the user as well, like from a very human perspective, right? Like games become popular because our friends go and play that similar game. And so like, I think the general gamer, they're not thinking about whether or not a game is decentralized or centralized. It's like, am I having fun?
Yeah.
Are my friends here having fun with me? If they are, then I don't give a shit.
Yeah.
Right.
Exactly.
But then like, I think blockchain does like enable a lot of really interesting like fractal economies that come out of this. So like, maybe there's like a huge following with like an in-game item, and it's similar to like Ethereum, and you can create ERC20 tokens.
Yeah.
You can do the same thing with a game. It's like they can create in-game assets based on things within in-game things. And so it's like this infinitely scalable kind of fractal model. There's also models that like, sometimes like I'm thinking like, do we need blockchain for everything? Like maybe the economical part where people own items and they can trade items can be on the blockchain. But then like, do I need to actually publish every move to the blockchain?
Right.
Like,
Not every bullet needs to be a token.
Every bullet into every wall needs to be recorded, right? I'm not sure if that needs to happen, right? Because that's like a lot of computational power, and it could just mean that like we still use trusted third parties for certain things, and we use the blockchain for others. And so like these mixed models can come about as well.
That's interesting.
Also, like the last point that I'll make, which is a little bit less related to ZK gaming, but still related to zero knowledge, is that I think in the future we can use zero knowledge machine learning, essentially like verifiable computing, especially if you're going to start using models to like generate worlds in games. Like you want to make sure that the models that you're using, like you want certain parts of that model to be verifiable. Like you're using a certain subset of details that are fair to players to generate worlds, so that you're not just generating worlds that are unfair to other players. So that's like a kind of like a side example that I think is pretty cool as well.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Do you know, I am going to stay with you for my next question, but you did remind me of something you were talking there about. To the gamer themselves, they don't necessarily care what the technology is and so on. I think Michael demonstrated that in his talk as well about some of the things that Sequence does. I think we were talking at GDC about how gamers, when they go to play an online game, let's say a traditional Web 2 game, they don't care about TCP/IP protocols or any of that stuff. They just want to press a button and get playing, don't they? And I guess it's kind of the same with blockchain. We don't have to talk about the technology every time and try and onboard them. But you also said a thing there about interoperability. And I think you've all mentioned that at various points. It's often cited as a dream use case for blockchain games. But there's a ton of technical challenges in that too. I think you mentioned as well about being able to display it somewhere else and not use it. But the idea that you can take an item from one game and that someone will build experience around it in another game, that's a really difficult thing to do, right? Is it just a pipe dream?
I don't think it's a pipe dream. I think it's like we can definitely enable that. I just think we have to think of it from a user perspective. Like, even if the interoperability exists, like the user shouldn't really be exposed to that. Like our goal as product people is to abstract that away.
Okay.
So like if I'm building a game for someone, it's going to be first and foremost fun and engaging. Sure, your items can be sold, and it's like, okay, if you want to sell them, you can go here, here, and here. I'm not going to mention anything about like, oh, what kind of infrastructure do you need? Like gas costs, whatever. We're going to abstract all of that infrastructure away for you, because we don't want the user to think about that.
Yeah.
We just want them to have fun and play with their friends.
Yeah. Makes sense. Mo, what's your take on that? Interoperability?
I mean, I think that's definitely something that will happen eventually. Probably more like the publisher level, versus between different publishers.
Right.
I think the technology in the industry is it's in an infancy. It's just a bit too fragmented. It's technically really difficult to provide interoperability when people are all running on different chains. So I think that we need some sort of consolidation and stuff where that happens. But certainly at the publisher level, if they're making similar games, that is doable, right? They're building on the same technology, and that's, I think, something that is heralded as something that we could do. But right now, there just doesn't seem to be great use cases for it. I mean, I guess you could take your avatar and use it in other games. Personally, I don't think it's like the holy grail of blockchain.
Right. Yeah.
It is, a lot of people do cite it as a cool use case that you can do that, like Web2 won't be able to do as well. But I don't think we're there yet. But we're still quite far away from that.
Yeah, fair play. Michael, what do you think?
Yeah, I think it'll happen at some point. Though I think cross-brand to game interoperability is easier to achieve right now. So like Nike and EA Sports, right? Like you'll be able to wear your Nike kicks in EA Sport, like Madden games and stuff, and then you could also wear your Nike kicks or maybe they become skates in NHL, right? Or soccer shoes in FIFA. Nike times Fortnite. I think we'll see a ton of like fashion and clothing brands do this, where their items work in all these different virtual worlds and games. And to Mo's point, like I think, larger game companies, publishers can create interoperable items amongst an ecosystem of games. I think cosmetics are easier to work with because it doesn't impact the gameplay mechanics. But I think eventually we will get to those. And again, I think it'll be easier for the publishers or game studios that own many games.
Right.
All that said, though, like I have seen games in early development where they allow you to bring particular digital collectibles into their game. So let's say it's like a CryptoPunk or a Pudgy Penguin or a Cool Cat or whatever, right? And like you bring your collectible into the game, and then using AI, they'll populate that character into the game world, and they'll actually give you a different world or storyline depending on which NFT collection you're using. And I've already seen one game doing that, and like others could easily allow you to bring your items into those worlds as well. So I think that's really fun for people who own particular items. And so I definitely don't think it's a pipe dream.
Interesting. Yeah, that's good. Blockchain and AI, we could do a whole panel on that separately, right? I'm sure. Mo, I'm going to come to you first for our next question. So we've talked about some of the general terms and the kind of technologies that are available. Let's dive into the specific just for a moment. Can you give us some examples of some great blockchain games? Like what should people be playing? People in the audience here who maybe want to see what's good. What should they be playing? It's fine if you mention your own. That's
their game is really good.
Skyweaver.
Yeah. Skyweaver. I like mythical games, how they approach blockchain games. So Blancos and also obviously NFL Rivals. Those are like the ones that I like the most. So those are the three that I would name.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a ton out there, but I think I really like the way specific mythical how they've approached their stuff, because it's not a I guess they call it like Web 2.5. It's like still a free to play game that has NFTs, and I think that's kind of like I think that's the way to approach it currently. So that's what I would say.
I'm going to stay with you. So I'm going to ask everyone the same question. I'm going to stay with you for a second while we're talking about great examples. Let's talk about kind of the technologies and the chains and platforms that you recommend that are great for the ecosystem. You folks are working with Forte, is that right?
We are, yeah.
Yeah. Do you want to just give us a little bit of an insight into that? What's good about that? Yeah.
Well, they're a middleware platform, so they're not technically a chain. Okay. They're any chain, so you can kind of like bridge to any chain and decide what chain you want to work on. But they provide you all the tools for like minting on the fly, just like you guys have like your tools, sequence, etc. So that's the kind of like what they have. You'll give you a wallet, so they do everything in the middle there that you don't really need to care about or want to. But you can still build the game and then have Web3 elements without having to go delve down really deep into it, right? But for us working with them, we're currently on a private sidechain, but that's kind of still undecided.
Okay, interesting. Frank, I'll come to you. Let's those two things then. Can you recommend some great blockchain games, some great examples of what we've been talking about, games that you're playing, and then also, what platforms do you recommend? And it's fine if you talk about yours, because for those who missed your talk, you're Aleo, right? So
Just a side note, I think we did work with Forte as well in like the very early stages in one of our test nets. I think when it comes to platforms, I think like as long as like I'm pretty like platform agnostic, but I think Aleo as a platform to help build decentralized private applications has its benefits in that it does fix the player privacy problem. That being said, like the toolkit we built, it's still a work in progress, and I think there's a lot of foundational work that needs to be done until we can realize those like really complex, imperfect information games on the blockchain. And like to your previous question, actually, like I was thinking of the question like which comes first? Is it like distribution or is it the interoperability and also the chain? And I would argue that distribution comes first, meaning like Michael's example of just like all of these esports brands. It's like that was the first thing that came, and then people started drawing the connections to, oh, we can have that on our platform. We might be on a different chain than a similar game, but it's the commonality of the distribution of that concept of like esports and jerseys and shoes and how it can belong on this chain. That brings interoperability. Whereas like if you try to interoperate before you had that kind of distribution, it might not work the same way.
Interesting.
That's just kind of how I think about it. But yeah, I think like I'm mostly chain agnostic, although I do have like a zero knowledge proof bent.
Great. And for those maybe who missed your talk, you've got a game, a kind of proof of concept game, which is a version of Liar's Dice, right?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Well, can you remind us what's the URL of that?
Baloney.io.
Baloney.io, that's great. I'm gonna give that a go.
Spelled with an O.
Okay, I am crazy good at Prudo, by the way, so I'll be going there and checking that out. Michael, what's your take on this? We've obviously you've got your own game, which we've spoken about. You're welcome to tell us a little bit more about that, and then some great examples of blockchain games, and what chains and platforms do you recommend?
So in terms of games, I think some really cool ones in the role-playing RPG genre. There's a game called Hunters on Chain, another one called DeFiMon. I think they're cool and fun. A strategy game called Mojo Melee, which is part of Planet Mojo. It's really cool. There's also Tower Conquest Metaverse Edition, which is a cool mobile tower defense game. It's really fun. Sunflower Land it's a fun farming simulator if you're into farming simulators. And there's a couple games that I'm very excited about that are still kind of in like private access, but one's called Shrapnel, and it's a shooter, and like it's crazy. And then this other game called My Pet Hooligan, which I just encourage you to look both of those up. I feel like if you kind of reach out, they'll give you access, but they're not, fully.
I should say I've played Shrapnel actually. They had
Did you like it?
Yeah, it was great. It's by a team that's ex Microsoft, the next ex HBO, and they're doing some great work in Seattle. And they demonstrated it in March, and I had a go, and it's great.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, that's what we're starting to see, right? Like a lot of folks, because of developer platforms like Aleo, like Sequence now, game makers can forget about the technology and just focus on building great content. And we're seeing these studios, and people, whether it's AAA companies or folks leaving those companies to start their own startups. So all this incredible content is going to be coming online in the next couple of years, which is really exciting. And from a platform perspective, I mean, of course, I'm going to say Sequence, so Sequence is our all-in-one developer stack that we've built, and it really makes building Web3 games, applications, and experiences easy. It takes care of wallet and onboarding for you. There's a marketplace engine, so you can have in-game branded custom marketplaces, make trading instant, easy, and secure for your players. Minting and integrating digital collectibles into your game. It abstracts away gas fees entirely. You can have gasless transactions. And then there's a no-code dashboard so that it's just super easy for even non-technical teammates to leverage the tools. And there are SDKs for mobile, web, Unity, and Unreal Engine. So like we've been obsessed for the last 6 years, and having built our own game, we've had to solve all of the blockchain infrastructure and user experience pain points, and we really want to deliver the best developer experience to those who are building with it. And we're always improving. We're always like taking feedback from our partners and our community. And there's 70 games currently leveraging it, and like hundreds more that are kind of in the process. So yeah, we'd absolutely love to help whoever's looking to build or integrate Web3 into their experiences or games.
That's cool, thank you. I should say, this is a point where I should also express an interest. There's a game called Ev.io, which is worth playing, and Pocket Gamer is part of the same group that owns that, so that's kind of our game. But so if you go and play Ev.io, that's a shooter that uses, you can trade, you can earn from playing, but also you can trade your skins and things, so that's fun. We've only got about 15 minutes left. I've got loads of questions, but I did say that I would take questions from the audience. I'll make some time at the end, but did anyone want to chip in on the things that we discussed so far? Brilliant. Can we get a mic down here? Thank you.
Hello, my name is Umar, and my question is about centralized versus decentralized gaming challenges. So when we talk about decentralization, it more about gives empower to the community. So they are people, they are organization versus technology. So when we talk about blockchain, so it gives kind of control to the community. So, but there are still some games, they just run away, they just stop their operations, and the reward that community need to be expected, they didn't get that. So my question is blockchain ready to give control to the community, to their users, to the people, or they are still hesitate in terms of giving control to the community? Thank you.
Who wants to start with that?
I mean, blockchain is ready to enable that. I just don't know if, as a game maker, you would want your community to have a final say over decisions in the game. I think there have been examples out there where it's kind of gone sideways. From my experience, designing game by community never really works. You know, you need like a creative director. So I really just think that for gaming specifically, decentralizing ownership or creative control is not a good thing, and I don't think that necessarily work. And that's just for gaming, right? I think there may be other applications where that is useful, but I just think it will be detrimental to your actual game if you set it up that way. From my experience, and from what we've seen happening online, right, where the community basically takes over and then has a different vision than the creators, and so then I think that causes quite a lot of problems.
Interesting. I don't know, Frank, did you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I think this actually sounds a lot similar to DAOs, so decentralized autonomous organizations. I've been a part of a couple of them, and I think the general feeling and the sense that I get when I'm part of a DAO is that, oh, it's great, like it's community owned, everyone like participates in governance decisions, and also nothing gets done. And so like there needs to be, especially if you're building like a very focused product, there needs to be some sort of leadership. And so it's like maybe a DAO is not the best type of organization for that, but it doesn't mean you don't want to have any aspects of blockchain. And I think like before we were talking about like 50-50 models where it's just like maybe the economy within a game can be tokenized, and that will help with interoperability. There's like better asset ownership, but then like maybe the game design itself doesn't necessarily have to be decentralized. So there are like, it's sort of like trying to figure out what are the benefits and what are the proper uses for those benefits, and not just like kind of painting it all, just like let's all decentralize and go to the blockchain in one fell swoop. Yeah.
Yeah, that's good. Thanks. I don't know, Michael, did you want to take that question?
Yeah, I agree with both these guys in that like, I imagine there is a kind of experience or game that you could totally decentralize, and like that becomes part of the fun, that it's just chaotic and not oriented around a creative director, and you're not going to produce some AAA quality or like super engaging thing. It's just more about like the experimentation process, and that could be fun. But if you're talking about like a high fidelity video game, I don't think that, just like Mo said, it is designed by committee, and then it's just like how do you make a decision, you know? And like in DAO voting structures, to Frank's point, like they tend to be pretty disorganized, and they haven't produced a lot yet, but I certainly will say it's very nascent, right? Like decentralized autonomous organizations, it's a brand new concept. I do think it's somewhat akin to like the LLC, like corporations, in that but just kind of in a new paradigm. So I think we will come up with amazing use cases for DAOs, and maybe modified structures to the way they currently exist, and different tiers of voting power that could enable some form of authority and leadership. I think it's like a blue ocean, and there's tons of opportunity, but I actually can't think of a single example right now where I'm like, yeah, they did an amazing job on it. The bankless DAO seems kind of cool, but I actually don't know like the ins and outs of it. So yeah.
Great, thank you. Thanks for your question. Do we have any other questions before we move on? I'm welcome to take it. Oh, one in the front row, if you've got a mic. Thank you very much.
It kind of seems that like what blockchain has, the technology, especially with the public ledger, it seems like what it was made for has kind of been like manipulated for different uses. And it seems right now that hearing you guys talk and just me listening, it seems like it's kind of like blockchain is being used to like create like worlds that you can kind of, or worlds that you can kind of just move certain materials from one application to another in order to have some sort of like seamless experience. And I was just wondering what do you guys what are you guys how do you see blockchain, and specifically like what's your vision of blockchain?
I mean, I met Vitalik Buterin, Ethereum's inventor, in 2014, a year before Ethereum's launch, and what I imagined were virtual worlds and like these new internet applications where all participants, users and creators, share in the value and the creation of these ecosystems. And so I'm convinced that we're actually inside of a blockchain-based virtual reality right now, and that we can create a whole bunch more of them, and that's what these technologies enable. And I think, with the convergence of various technologies, right, like AI and being able to generate virtual worlds in the near future, and very immersive ones, and Web3 and blockchain, and being able to transfer ownership in these virtual worlds, right? Like, I don't think it's going to be too much longer before we're able to create an experience that feels as tangible as this one. And then I think it's going to evoke a lot of philosophical contemplations about the nature of reality itself, and which I think is very fun and like explorative and playful. And I think too that the big reason that attracted to me to Web3 in the first place was the symbiosis, was the fact that like it reminded me of nature in a way where all entities are serving one another and sharing amongst one another and like distributing value in a way that's harmonious, as harmonious it can be. There's obviously like differing levels, but I do think that Web3 can enable also the exploration of new economic models, right? Like we're all talking about games, and I think that's really cool, but you can very quickly test out an economic design that you could not as easily do in the physical world or with a country or a government, right? And I think we'll come up with like really cool innovation in economy design space that we could then extrapolate to a physical world level as well. I'll pause there.
No, that's great. We're getting down to the ideology and the philosophy of it. Mo, do you want to dive in there?
No, I think I agree with everything he said here. I think in the real world or real verse, I think also like Web3 and blockchain is going to become more and more pervasive in many aspects of society, not just like games. We'll be using it, like we can use DAOs for voting. We'll be using soul tokens for our passports and identity, and we can start tracking things like, he actually does have a diploma from this university. So I think it's really gonna. Me personally, I see Web3 as going to be revolutionizing everything digital going forward. So we will be living in a actual Web3 world. It won't be just like a digital metaverse for sure.
That's great. Yeah, Frank, did you?
Yeah, I think like when I first came across the concept of blockchain, it was just like, distributed ledger, and it's like pretty simple. And then it's just like you upgrade that with Ethereum, and it's like provable computation. And then now we're upgrading it again and saying with zero knowledge, it's like provable computation with privacy. And then all of a sudden things like, it's like once you see it, you can't unsee it. So like Mo talks about digital identities, everything is starting to go online, right? But with provable computation and privacy, now you can have your digital identity online. You can use it anywhere. You can prove to someone that you're of age or you like had a certain grade in university without revealing any of those components.
Or having like just like one username for like the social media.
Yeah, like you can have one username for social media and you can prove that you own that account without like revealing where it's tied to in terms of like your real name or somewhere else. And so like it's kind of like the original conception of the private internet. And then now it's just kind of like on a distributed ledger, and you can prove every step of the computation. You can hide or conceal. You can conceal or reveal anything that you want. And it's just like a solution that I think makes a lot of sense. But then I feel like the way we approach it, we still have to approach it from like a problems perspective. Like what problem does that solve? Otherwise, we're just building solutions for no good reason. And so like, yeah, it's just like making sure that we're solving for problems that can be solved for this technology.
Yeah, that's interesting. I just wrote down, I'm convinced we're living in a blockchain-enabled virtual world right now. That's
I like that as well.
Yeah, we'll maybe that be a topic of a panel another time. Do you know what, we've literally got like a minute left. Does anyone want to have there's a question here in the middle row, and we'll take that, and that'll probably be the last one for the panel. Thank you.
Hey guys. A lot's been spoken about interoperability and symbiosis of these networks. And in the Web 2 world, you can have a Word document and open it in Pages, and it kind of looks like what you want it to, but formatting is always a challenge. As we move into more complex 3D assets and persistence across what you own and achieve, it feels like right now there will forever be walled gardens of things that work better, like you were talking about with EA Sports and Nike, and like, yeah, whether it's FIFA or Madden, that's great. But as soon as you move into 2K or Minecraft or the next thing, seems to be like we still need to build the next generation of like what is like the internet protocol now, sort of like a level playing field of here's generally how things are going to work. How do you see that transition happening for 3D assets and truly being able to purchase a sweater here and have it appear there if the fidelity and the graphics or the gaming engine changes and the fundamental technology underneath what's being built is changing?
Now then, that sounds like we could spend a whole session on that. Unfortunately, we're basically out of time. I'd like everyone to get a chance to answer that, but is there a way to answer that briefly? Who wants to go first? Mo, do you want to take that?
Yeah, we're still kind of far away from that. I think consolidation is going to be key for something like that to happen. It kind of is happening in the game space. Now pretty much everybody uses Unreal or Unity, so I think if we keep just going that way, perhaps then we can take 3D model from here and there because it's the same game engine. But oh man, yeah, there's just a lot of issues there. Yeah, I don't think we're anywhere close to that. And then not to mention the whole chain side of it, like what chain you're building on, can you bridge between here and there and move it? So there's a lot of issues I think still, and I don't think we're close to full interoperability yet. There's just too many technical challenges.
Does anyone else want to have a go on that in the final few seconds? I don't know, Frank, do you have anything to add?
To me, it sounds a little bit like in order to be interoperable, you're going to have bridges, and with bridges, there are going to be breaches of security. And this is where I think like zero knowledge proofs can come in, because it's like I can prove to you that I own a certain asset on a different chain. If I submit a proof stating that, and any verifier on a new chain can say, oh, okay, so he does actually own it on a separate chain, and you can do like a sort of like a mint and lock sort of deal in between two using a zero knowledge proof.
That's a good idea.
There is like a ZK bridge that you can implement with a proof, which means that I can interoperate between two chains privately. So like with that technology, I think it's possible, but I'm also not a developer, so like I'm sure there are like other considerations that we want to look at, but I'm very optimistic that something like that can happen. Like ZK bridges are already happening today, so like you can literally take any piece of information off of like a website, like TLS data, shuttle that into a ZK proof and say I have this proof that says I own this particular Twitter account, and then you can tie that to a Web3 account. You submit a proof, and then on whichever chain that you're submitting that proof to, it can let the verifier know that you actually own that account. So like if you can do that with Web 2, you can probably do it in between two Web 3 entities as well.
That's a good idea. So you're not actually like taking the NFT and like using it here, but you're saying like, oh, I have it, so it's regenerating it there.
Yeah, it's
and,
kind of like the
kinda in its image.
NFT like exists on Ethereum, but then like you just take a zero knowledge proof and submit it to a separate chain saying that you
Good
own.
idea. Yeah.
And then like because it protects your privacy, you wouldn't have to like expose any of your Ethereum addresses or addresses on the other chain, and then you kind of can have that interoperability.
So I'm gonna. We haven't heard from Michael on that, but I'm aware that we're out of time and I need to move on. If you would like to quiz these guys more and find out what Michael has to say on this or these guys, I suggest look you up on Meet to Match. Is that fair? You on the Meet to Match platform?
I'm actually not sure what that is.
Oh, okay, all right. That's the meeting platform for this event. I'll email you the thing. But yeah, I'll grab these guys out now on the show floor. But we have to move on. So a round of applause for our three speakers, Mo, Frank, and Michael.